I love when I see all these little squares populate on my screen. This is great. Thanks for being here, everybody. It's great to see you. Well, we have a special program planned for you. Let me get started here. I'm Joy Brand Richardson. For those of you who I have not yet met, I'm the Vice President of Professional Development at JCC Association, and I have shoulder-length brown hair and
On you.
glasses.
Am I
I'm
Cool.
joined by
No,
my colleague,
very nice
Sue
to meet you.
Schwartz, who is a member of our talent team at JCC Association. We at JCCA really feel important that it gathers people from all across the continent to strengthen the JCC movement, and these peer communities are a way for us to achieve this goal. As you come into the room, please put yourself on mute. There's a couple of other things that I'd like to remind us about. In order to build community, we ask that you keep your camera on, and if you can, put your first name and the name of your JCC or your city there so that we know where everybody is from. We start our convenings with some guiding principles. We understand there may be people who are new to these peer communities or new to their role, and we ask that you each bring wisdom to the conversation. We ask you to approach each other with respect, and we invite us to ask questions if there's any that need clarification. Today's session is being recorded and will be posted on the JCC Resource Center. That's where all of the recordings from all of the JCC peer communities are available. So please do let your staff know about these peer community gatherings. We have over a dozen different groups. You can find all of that information on the JCC Resource Center. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to Paige, who is the volunteer co-chair or chair of this peer community. Paige works with a small group of people to plan these meetings. I'd like to thank Paige for her dedication to this and turn it over to her now.
Thanks, Joy. Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're excited to have a great session, we hope, for today. So thank you, Joy and Sawyer, for making it possible, for the support on this. I wanted to start today by just, for those people that don't know, what's going on. Not everyone knows what's going on the West Coast, but for those that don't know how it's affecting the JCs or not, we just wanted to start today really by mentioning that obviously I think all of us, our hearts are with all the West Coast JCCs and the staff and the members and all the communities there. Joy has shared with me that fortunately the JCCs have been open and they've been able to help in relief efforts and needing daycare and facilities, and fortunately right now they've been not affected in terms of their physical buildings, although we know they're affected in many other ways, and so we just hope for their continued safety. So in terms of today's session, for those of you who were able to be on the session earlier this fall, we had met and really focused on sort of how number two's connection with their CEOs was. And that could be based on what your position is. It was different, and we split into smaller groups and we're able to have some small group conversations. So we wanted to sort of take it to the same topic, but a different perspective. So we invited today two CEOs who are long-term CEOs in our field and have had a lot of experience at their current JCCs as well as other JCCs over their careers, and really hear from them sort of what their best practices are in terms of working with their number twos, both currently as well as just over their experiences, what they feel are the best ways for CEOs and number twos to work together, and how for both to really have successful relationships and successful JCCs because of that. So I'm going to let Sue, actually, who's going to moderate the conversation, introduce the two of them. Sue Gelsey, who's one of us and is here from the JCC on the Palisades in Tenafly. And so Sue, I'm going to turn it over to you for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Paige. I think we're all one of us, but I appreciate the introduction. I also want to point out, and I'm not sure, I didn't do a full attendance of everyone on the call. While our JCC is called Kaplan JCC on the Palisades, we are not at all near or connected to the Palisades fires. And I did get some beautiful outreach of well wishes this week, and I appreciate it. Although almost every single person who reached out to me, actually all the people, 4 people reached out. They're all closer to the fires than we are. So Paige, I appreciate you starting off with clarity about that, and our hearts are certainly with the communities in LA. And I appreciate the opportunity to be in conversation with truly 2 of my favorite people, Jordan Shanker and Laura Friedman. Laura Friedman is the CEO of the Shimon and Sarah Birnbaum JCC in Bridgewater, New Jersey. And so that we're all on the same page. Paige, who you were just hearing from, is the Chief Operating Officer who has worked with Laura for quite some time now. And Jordan Shanker, who is the CEO of the Peninsula JCC in Foster City, California. Also, in respect to full disclosure, I worked with Jordan for several years here at the Kaplan JCC. Prior to being in Foster City, Jordan was here at Kaplan JCC, also worked at JCC Association, Richmond JCC, the Houston JCC, and the Portland JCC. And I can confirm he's not running from any authorities that we are aware of, although his resume would certainly indicate that perhaps there's something going on we should all look into. Really excited to have both Jordan and Laura here, and to be able to be in conversation with 2 people who are both long-time JCC professionals and longtime CEOs at this point. And kidding aside, Laura's been at her single JCC for quite some time, was the number 2 there and has moved up. Jordan has a really different career path, worked at several JCCs and similarly moved up from a number 2 position into the CEO role. So both bring a lot of really great experience. So let's just start with that. Well, I gave a brief touch on each of your career paths. Laura, if you could start first, just a couple of minutes about your journey in the JCC field, your path to becoming an exec, and why you actually wanted to be an exec. And then Jordan, same question will go to you after.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So I have been at this JCC for 25 years, but I'm a true JCC, only worked at JCCs my entire life. So there you go. I know most of the CEOs seem to be coming in from a different direction, but I wasn't born at a JCC, but I feel like I was at this point. I started at the Staten Island JCC. I see Lee somewhere on here. 30 plus years ago, I was a teen worker. I was a camp director. I was a user, so I was there. And I also actually was a preschool teacher. So I did that in the Staten Island JCC. Life took me to Connecticut, where I worked at the West Hartford JCC as their teen director / camp director / I supervised the senior program. I don't even understand how that worked into my job description because I had never worked with seniors before, but there I was. And then again, life brought me to New Jersey or back because I'm from New York and I wanted to move back here. My family was here. And I actually had stopped working for about a week and a half when I got a call from Steve Rosenberg, who was the exec at a brand new JCC, which is this JCC. And he said, I heard you were in the area. I was thinking, someone recommended you. And sure enough, for some reason, even though I planned on not working, I started that, I think 2 weeks later as what they called the program director. Then I was the assistant director. Then they called me the associate director. I mean, they all seem to have this different title, same job. And then I guess it was about 14 years ago. Paige would have to confirm that the exec at that point had left, and that's when I took over as the exec. So I have been here since the day the JCC has opened. Again, I think it's important to understand I've only worked at a JCC just because I really committed to this field in every way possible. And that is my JCC journey up to today.
Thank you. Jordan.
I feel like I've worked in the JCC my whole life, even when I was a kid. Basically every job I've ever had, the basket room attendant and the scorekeeper in the basketball league and a Hebrew tutor in the after-school Hebrew. It's basically all the work I've ever done. Born and raised in Portland, Oregon, 4th generation Oregonian. I started working at the JCC there at age 20 full-time. Now almost 40 years later, 6 different stops. I originally didn't intend to be a JCC career professional. I did it because I wasn't sure what else I wanted to do. And it wasn't until my first move, when I had been in Portland for 7 or 8 years as the teen and youth and camp person, and I was involved nationally and somebody recruited me to come to another JCC, that I even thought about the idea of JCC as a career. And at that moment, I decided that I wanted to think about it as a career. So I moved to Houston with the specific intention of wanting to get the training and development and experience to become a JCC exec. And at that time, one of the reasons I chose that particular opportunity was because Jerry Wishy, who was the exec there at the time, had placed 11 different JCC CEOs who had worked for him. So that seems like a pretty good training ground. And I spent 10 years there getting that experience to become a CEO at the JCC in Richmond, Virginia. I was there for 7 years. I then left there to go work for JCC Association, where I was for 4 years, where I oversaw our consultative practice to the field. And looking at the various names of the JCCs on the screen with us today, I think I visited all but one of the JCCs of all the people that are here on the phone today. And some of you, I think I visited while you were there. So it gave me a great depth of understanding of what lots of JCCs look like. And ultimately, I decided I really wanted to be in the field rather than serving the field. And that's when I made the move back to a field-based job as the CEO of the JCC in Tenafly, where I had the privilege of working with Sue. And ultimately, I would have retired in that job had Tenafly had two things: warmer weather and closer to Portland, Oregon. And since it had neither, I opted for an opportunity on the West Coast in California that is warmer weather and is closer to Portland, Oregon. So my path, I think, is probably more common of the JCC execs from 15 or 20 years ago, but I think Laura's probably more commonly represents many of the execs today. Both, I think, are interesting and give a different perspective and have really, I think, interesting benefits to them. As we spend time together, I think you'll see some nuance in how maybe each of us have approached the jobs and the relationships.
Thanks, Jordan. And the other thing I'm struck by is because of each of your journeys, you've had really different experiences relative to your relationship or relationships with your number twos. Whereas Jordan, partly by virtue of being in multiple places and also during those times having some turnover, whereas Laura's had steadiness in the relationship. So I'd love for you to both reflect on that. Jordan, if you want to go first on this one, is what would you consider like 4 or 5 or 2 or 3, whichever you want to pick, best practices in how you choose to work with your number two, and how has that varied based on different people you've worked with or your different experience, like your different where you've been in your life relative to the position?
Well, I think there's great variability depending on what I've needed at different times in my career based on what my skills and interests were and what my institution needed. And if I had been in the same place the entire time, I think those answers would have been different at different points in time. I had the challenge or benefit or opportunity, depending on how you look at it, with all 3 times I walked into a new CEO role, within a year, I was searching for a new number two. I'm not sure if that says something about me or the institutions that I served, but it was a really interesting opportunity because I could step back and say, what do I need in a number two right now? What does the institution need? And therefore go out and try and find that person. So I think the most important thing from my perspective is to say, what are the things that I think I have to do mission critical for our institution based on where my strengths and skill sets are? And then what else does the institution need? And therefore, how do I look for somebody who has those particular critical skills? If I were to sort of top line it, I think the CEO needs to be the chief strategist, the one thinking about the future, the one thinking about the intentionality about where the organization is headed. The CEO needs to be the get stuff done person, the know how to get things moving and to be the person who's going to be on the ground, managing the day-to-day, doing the work to get things done. That's probably the big picture I would provide.
Thanks. Laura?
So, I mean, I want to be treated. I want to treat people the way I want to be treated. I think that's just the way I've always done everything in my life. And having been the number two, and I hate that direction because I don't consider Paige the number two. I consider to me, it's just a terrible way of putting it. I think that I treat my staff, all of them, with respect and dignity. And I hope that they feel that I'm here for them and that I want their journey to be as important as what my journey is. So I agree with Jordan in that we do have some different, listen, as a CEO, I have to have the vision. I have to understand where the agency's going. I have to deal with certain things. But I didn't look, again, because I've been here for 25 years and Paige has been for 25 years, our relationship is very organic. It didn't have to be, I wasn't looking for Paige. Paige was here. I wasn't, so our relationship has grown with time and with caring and with trust. So it's hard thing to compare what I'm saying, to what Jordan's saying, because when you come in and you're hiring somebody, the way we hire someone yesterday, I have a resume, I'm looking at it, and there's certain things I'm looking for. So when it came down to being here and growing together and having been in the position, I think the key to anything is treating people the way you want to be treated. And I think that's just how I run this agency. And I know it seems simple, but I think it makes the ultimate difference when you're partnering with anyone. And that's what I would consider Paige, a partner.
Great. And I want to flip the direction of that same question. Is if I'm sitting as a participant on this call and I aspire to be a CEO, like Jordan, you drew a distinction on, kind of chief strategist and chief get it done. How does one move from one to the other, or even your personal journey of how you moved from one to the other? And I'm asking that not just for those people who aspire to be a CEO, but even relative to the way they do their jobs now. How do we get access to some of the parts of the job we don't currently do?
So I have a couple of observations. The first is, do the job you want to have. And therefore, if there are things you're not currently spending time and energy on in terms of area of responsibility or skill development, do those things and talk with your boss about those opportunities to do those things and take the initiative to achieve those things. One of the resources I would encourage you to look at, and Joy can share it around with you. One of the things we developed when I was at JCCA was a new book on executive search, which is part of the portfolio I oversaw. There's 2 pages in that book that we can email out to the group called Executive Competencies. There are 10 of them. And it's the way searches still run, that when communities are looking for a new CEO, they say, well, let's prioritize the 10 competencies. So if I were an aspiring CEO, I would take a look at that list and say, where am I strong and how do I get stronger in those places? And where do I have absolutely no experience where I need to have at least a little bit to think about how I might spend some time and energy doing that? But the other observation I would offer is I think you want to engage and inspire yourself in the work you're doing, regardless of what you aspire to be. And I want to be really clear. I think there have been tremendous professionals in our field who have been accomplished and achieved great things, who never aspired to be CEOs, and that's perfectly okay. It's focused on what you see your strengths as and what you want your role to be. The opportunity is to achieve some kind of level of inspiration and impact based on the work you're doing. So regardless of what your ultimate aspiration is, I think the objective still is, how do I leverage myself to do the things I'm best at, the things I'm most interested in, challenge myself to do work that is meaningful where I can be impactful.
Thanks.
I agree 100%. It always bothers me that we say, how do you go on to the next thing? Like, I think you should be the best at what you're doing. The JCCA used to run a program, the ETP program that I was part of, and it was executive training. And I don't think it was ever meant to be training you to be an executive at JCC. I think it was meant to be training you to be the best at skills that you needed to be in this profession. And I think that's where some of it gets lost. I think you should do what you're doing, focus on what you're doing, and then and excel at all those skills, because there's no skills that you have as a CEO that you don't need to be a CEO. It's not like I agree with him that there's certain things that we don't understand, and you have to, there's teachers, there's guides, there's mentors, there's people that you can sit down and talk to. But if you're the best at what you're doing as a CEO, then there's no reason that you can't step into a CEO position. I think the scariest part about it is you're afraid, oh my God, I'm going to be by myself all of a sudden. I remember very clearly when I was in the CEO position and I was thinking of taking on the next position, I was like, can I do it? I mean, our insecurities are the things that keep us where we are. And I am here to say to you that any of you as a CEO can go on to be a CEO as long as you have the support that you need around you. Because whatever skill set you don't have, as long as you hire or have the person next to you who can be that strength, then it's okay that you don't have that ultimate strength. Like you don't have to be everything. It's impossible to be everything. I personally am not everything. I know that, and my staff knows that. But what I am is able to, get them to be the best at what they are, and then their strengths take away from some of my weaknesses. I mean, it's okay to say that.
Great. Thank you. So when working with whoever is second in your organization, how do you go about establishing trust and ensuring open communication. And again, really different experiences between the two of you. So Laura, I don't know. I don't know if this is even something you could reflect on, or like it's
I
built
think
on
it can,
over
because
time.
at some point Paige and I didn't know each other, right? I mean, it wasn't like
What do you mean?
25 years. Yeah, I mean, at this point, but you have to earn it. It's like anything else in this world. Like, how do you establish trust with anyone? Like your board members, the staff you supervise. It's a matter of just earning it. It's a matter of being there for each other, doing everything you can to help that person go along. Like, I'm not in competition with Paige. I think that's the most important thing that we all need to remember, that our jobs are not in competition. Our jobs should run parallel with each other. Everything that we do is there to support each other. So as long as that is there and you never feel like something is happening that you're not aware of, or if the person, I have to empower Paige to be able to make decisions, because I can't be everywhere at all times. So the trust is in that. I have to be able to trust the person to do what they're doing, and that their intention is as pure as mine. It's just to make this agency a better agency. I think that as long as you both feel that you're aligned with the vision of the agency, the mission of your agency, then you're going to be okay. Obviously, if someone comes out with and all of a sudden something's, she says something that is out of nowhere, it's gonna worry me a little bit, but it doesn't happen, because again, we're not in competition. The CEO and the COO should be partners, not one and two, partners.
Jordan, anything to add there?
I think for me, it's three things. One is expectations, two is intentionality, and three is role clarity, right? So in terms of expectations, let's understand what is your job and what is my job, right? In terms of intentionality, one of my former number twos used to say, if we're both present in a meeting, one of us is probably redundant. And I think she was referring to me as being the one that was redundant. So let's have intentionality about how we're using our time and moving forward together. And clarity, I might even say vulnerability, is, I think, really important. When we talk about developing trust, it's not getting you to trust me, it's me giving you mine. And that's how you build trust. And one of the strongest ways you will build trust is to show and share your own vulnerability about what you're not able to do and why you need the other person, because that helps them to understand what how they can be most helpful, and then giving them space to be that for you and for the institution.
So I'm struck by the fact that, of course, these are answers that I think every single person on this call is like, yeah, of course, that makes perfect sense. And I imagine there's some people on the call who are partnered with someone who may not be as generous in their perspective and in their partnership. What advice would you give someone on this call who may not have an exec who is giving theirs relative to trust and partnership and open communication?
All right. So I've been there as my partner was not always my partner. And so I'm going to speak from a perspective of your job, not mine right now. So bottom line is that if you are working with someone that you don't feel like is doing everything that they can do, or that there's a problem, then you need to be able to still move forward and not change who you are because of that. You can't change somebody. It's really impossible. And you're in a position where you're working for someone, which makes it even more. I mean, the power play right there makes it uncomfortable. But what I always held to was remaining who I am. Not just because that person wasn't doing what I thought they should be doing, I never said that I'm not going to do what I need to do. And I think that's really important. I think that you can't change a person. You really can't. And we can get into, then do you go to your board? I mean, there's all kinds of things if you think someone's not doing something correctly. But stay true to who you are and make sure that they don't change who you are. I think that's really important, because I've seen it before, like where somebody will, say, I'll give up. If they're not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. And that's not going to help anyone. And I just want to go back to one thing, and I didn't say it earlier. I have been in this field for 35 years because I love it. Like, I want to do nothing else. I think if you don't have that passion behind you, and you don't think that what you're doing every day is incredible, then you're in the wrong field, because we make magic daily at this JCC. I sleep at night when I do sleep, knowing that we did something great the day before and we help people. And I think that's the most important reason. And I just wanted to get that across, because to me, you got to love it. So Jordan, you tell them, because again, I was in that position where I felt like I was working for someone who shouldn't have been in that position. And, and I didn't change who I was. And, but because I work with Paige, it's hard for me to tell you what to do about it. So go for it.
This is not a complicated answer to me. There are three things you do about it: fix it, manage it, or quit. And that really is the reality. And I wouldn't spend too much time getting to quit. If you've tried for 6 months to 6 to 12 months and you're not doing it, you're not going to do it. And you're better off moving on and finding another job. But I think there are lots of things you can do. And I will tell you, managing your boss is your job. It's not your boss's job to make sure that he manages that relationship the way you want it to, because they're not going to necessarily know how you want it. And it's instructive to be able to say to your boss, this is what I need from you. And the more you work with the boss, you're going to figure out, what do they need? What do they want? Well, how are they wired? If they're a data-driven person, you know, you need to go in and prepare data to make a decision. So how you figure out how your boss is wired, the more effective you will be at managing them. So state your expectations, figure out what they need, advocate for what you want, and try and work toward that objective. And if they're intractable on it, then you know they're not the partner that you ultimately want to work with. What my experience suggests is, I think the overwhelming majority of the time that these conflicts occur, the exec is not aware that the conflict is happening, or at least not to the extent that their number two is aware of. And therefore, you have an opportunity to say, hey, something about this isn't working for me. Here's what I think I need. I think it goes a long way. So I've had number twos who have educated me in all kinds of things over the years. And one of the ones that has been the most valuable for me is when some unnamed person might have said to me, you know, when you say, I don't care to a staff person, what it says to them is you really don't care about who they are and what's going on. I know what you mean is you support their decision or whatever they want to do, but you should say that because they're not hearing that. Oh, great. All right, I've got that now. I received that feedback. Took me, I don't know, still taking me get that vocabulary out of my language. But the idea that your exec knows this and is specifically trying to do things in a way that is making your life miserable, I think is the exception, not the rule. So help them to understand what it is you need, because ultimately, the more effective you are, you're going to make their job easier. The more effective they're going to be. I think they do want you to be effective and want you to be happy. And I would accept the responsibility for educating them about what that looks like for you.
Great point. And whoever's this person you're referring to feels like a very
So
smart
maybe you want to give the answer the question.
person. Wait, what'd you say?
So maybe you want to be part of the.
No, not at all. But I do think, I do want to comment that I imagine everyone on this call is supervising people, right? And you would want them to share with you. So I wonder, it's you know, think about it the way Jordan was just saying, like, put yourself in the shoes of someone reporting to you. You would want to be told if you're doing something that is making it hard for them. And I don't want to presume that these conversations are easy, depending on where you are in your relationship and where you are in your career and all the things. And to some extent, it's like the most important thing you need to do is to be able to elevate those things in order to, as Laura said, stay true to yourself and to be able to manage this and fix it. I want to circle back to some of the things that you were talking about building the skills that people need, whether it's to move to a CEO role and or to enhance ourselves in our current roles. So how do you approach professional development with your senior team? And what would you recommend folks do relative to advancing their own professional development interests? Jordan, you want to go first on this one?
Sure. I'm a big believer in strength-based leadership. So I really like the idea of figure out what you do well and figure out how to do more of that, as opposed to what do you stink at and how to fix it. So I really like the idea of being self-aware enough and with your senior team to say, these are the things these folks do really well, and I want to leverage and increase their impact in those spaces. How we think with intentionality about professional development for the senior team and the rest of the team should flow from there. If these are the things we know are strengths from our team, let's do more training and development work on that, and let's focus on it. The other thing I would observe is do less, but do it better. My biggest pet peeve in doing staff training is when you have the big all staff meeting and you talk about customer service or conflict management or fill in the blank, and then you ignore those things for 364 days until you have the all-day staff meeting the next year. You're much better off being more narrowly focused on your own development and the development of your team. but I double down in that space, whatever that is. Have your goals tied to it. Have your mid-year evaluations tied to it. Have your performance reflections at the end of the year tied to it, so that you're really focusing and diving deep on those few things you're going to say are going to matter. And even better if you can tie them to departmental and agency goals. So be focused, be more narrowly constricted, and lean into strengths.
Laura?
I mean, we encourage everyone here to go after professional development in whatever way, whatever they feel is, it's similar to what Jordan said, to what they need, you know, at that moment in time. And if it means making them better at what they're doing, great. If they need a skill set that they don't have yet that they feel like it would make better, then go for it. But I can't, very clearly, I try not to micromanage people, and I can't go out there and, you know, definitely from JCCA, I'll see something and I send it over to this person and say, I think this might be a great fit for you. But I have encouraged people to step forward and say what they need a lot of the time, because I can't possibly know what my aquatics director, what's available in all kinds of areas. So the same goes for the COO. Like if anything comes through that I think will help in any way, 100% encourage. And if the person comes to me, Paige comes to me and says, I want to do something, I say, go for it. It's not a question. Like if you think it's going to be something that's going to make you better, make you do things differently, something that will help you in any way, then you should go for it. So how do I encourage professional development, which I think is where the question started, is by encouraging people to do it and by saying yes. I think one of the things that's really hard, and some people fall into this category, is you encourage people to do it, and then when they come to you and say, I have this idea, or here, this is a great thing, then it's all of a sudden no. So, you know, I think it's more like, let's figure it out, not a no. If they're working that hard and they think something is going to benefit the agency as well as themselves, then there's no reason to say no. And if it's a money situation, let's find it. I
And
think we
also
have.
add just one more thing, and that is how we offer training and learning to different people at different times for their needs. We're dabbling here at the Peninsula with a learning management system, which we launched just over a year and a half ago, and a couple of other JCCs have joined with us to provide asynchronous training to staff. So you upload training onto this portal, and then people can access it whenever they need or want. So finding different ways to connect staff to training opportunities in different ways at different times is also part of the opportunity for how we think about ongoing professional development.
Thanks. So the consistent theme here is the importance of all of us advocating for ourselves, whether it's in the relationship, what we need professionally, all the things that we cannot and should not wait for the exec necessarily to initiate these things. We need to take charge of that. I have a whole long list of questions. I'm going to ask either one or two more, and then we're going to open it up to the group, because more important than the questions I think are important are the questions that you all think are important. So I'm giving you a little heads up on that so you could formulate your question. And I imagine we'll ask you to use the raise hand feature, and then someone will put you on the spotlight so you can ask that question, or go ahead and put it in the chat and I'll read it aloud from there. So before we get to that, if we could dive into the inevitable thing when people work together, there's going to be disagreements. How do you, in your relationship, currently navigate when there's a disagreement? And you could pick it if it's a different perspective or a different opinion, or Laura gave an example of possibly Paige giving a different answer than you might have wanted to, whatever that could be. How do you navigate that? And similarly, how do you advocate for the other folks on this call to navigate when they feel there's been a known difference of opinion? This isn't a hidden thing. Laura, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think like ultimately, here's what I'm going to say to you, and I hope you can understand it, is that if something terrible happens, and ultimately is going to be my responsibility if something, you know, ultimately I have to have the final say in things that happen here, because I'm going to end up being the person the board's going to come to. And so I think I have to start with that, because as much as Sue believes that Paige and I are always singing and skipping through the hallways, it's not necessarily the case all the time, 95% of the time. No.
Okay, all right.
So, but the thing is, we don't get to that point. And that's the part that you knew I was going to say, Sue, because it's not like if there's a disagreement, it's a conversation. It's not an argument. It's a conversation. And listen, there's plenty of times I could be wrong. So I hope that you have an open relationship with your exec where you can respect the fact that they have to have the final word, because what they're going to end up being the person who has to just, who's going to hold, it's going to be their fault. Like if something bad happens, or if whatever happens, ultimately it's the CEO who has the top responsibility. However, I also hope that you can understand and sit in a room. Like I use Paige as a sounding board. Like there, we are one person. Like it's a tough place to be to make these decisions. And I don't, there needs to be a person that you feel completely comfortable with. And I hope that you all have that, or at least that you can hopefully eventually get to that. So as far as disagreements go, we do not agree on everything, but we have an open conversation where we'll go back and forth. Pros, cons, old fashioned, like, what do you think? What's going to happen if we do this? What's going to happen if we don't do this? And then we come to an agreement. And I believe, and I think Paige can tell you that she understands that ultimately it has to be my decision, because I'm going to be the one who has to explain it in the end when it comes to something really big. But when it comes to something that she's extremely passionate about, I say go. Again, it goes back to, you have to have trust, you have to believe in the person, and I'll say go for it. And I'm going to stand behind you as long as, it's not anything that's going to be, crazy ultimately is what I'm trying to say, which I don't think we've ever been there, So I think that's it. I think that as long as you understand that, that the CEO is going to be, the person is going to be held accountable for something, that they have to be able to, be able to say here and there, yes or no.
In this space, this is a place where an ounce of prevention is worth several pounds of cure. Right. So developing trust and developing an open understanding of what our roles are and navigating the space for each other to be in those areas is going to prevent much of that conflict from happening. And I would advocate really strongly that you think about how to do much more of that than worrying about how to deal with the conflict when it comes. But when it inevitably does come, I will tell you again, I would say that the overwhelming majority of my colleagues appreciate and value when they have someone in the building who's going to be a truth teller. Because I have 350 employees and there are only 2 of them that will come in my office and say, what the hell are you thinking about? Right? Only my chief operating officer and my CFO are the only 2 people that are really going to come into my office and challenge me about anything. And that is really important for me to have, because otherwise you're the emperor with no clothes, right? The idea that I can agree with myself just fine. I don't need other people to do it for me. I need somebody to come in and challenge my assumptions and to be the counterpoint to say, well, what about this? And the way I would advocate all of you having this conversation would be to say, have you thought about ... and offer the consequences, to say, I'm concerned about the downside risk about this. How do we mitigate the fallout from this kind of an outcome so that you're responsible for making sure that you're pointing out the reasons you think something could be problematic and sharing your point of view and advocating for an opinion. And I will tell you, the overwhelming majority of my colleagues are thirsty and seeking that kind of a partner.
And I think it comes from building the relationship, right? I mean, it's not about the disagreement shouldn't just, you should have the relationship built before that comes to it. I mean, it's hard. It's not, I don't think anyone can be sitting here saying, if life was simple and you could just spray some fairy dust over the place and everything is perfect, it's great. But it comes from years and months and days of just talking and being truthful with each other. I mean, I think that's just what it's all about. Because again, I think Jordan said it very beautifully, that if someone is challenging something that you're doing out there, your COO should be able to tell you that. It shouldn't be they're uncomfortable coming into your office. If you're uncomfortable going into your CEO office, then there's something wrong. There's something very wrong.
Yeah, thank you both. I love that. I love both of your answers on that, and they're obviously so in sync. And I think it's important that we all hear that part of our role is not necessarily always to agree, and it's to be that truth teller, to be that voice. And when we walk out of that office, we may not have changed their opinion. As Laura said, at the end of the day, we have to respect that the CEO has that final say. But that doesn't mean we should give up our responsibility of having that thoughtful conversation and that really constructive feedback. Certainly that is the relationship that I think we would all aspire for, that we have an exec who welcomes that feedback. And if you don't currently, that's something to actually pay attention to, right? And to ask yourself, is that them or is that me? Right? Like, it might be you feeling that you can't have that conversation. Laura, I appreciate your vulnerability on this. Is like, it's lonely. I've not been the CEO. It's a lonely position that you're in your position for a reason. Everyone on this call, and I believe your opinions would be respected when you when you say some hard truths to, or hard opinions to your CEO. So I really appreciate both of your responses to that. Let's open it up. If there's questions from anyone on this call, if you could use the raise hand feature, and we will give you a chance to ask that question, or I could go to one of the other 20 questions that I haven't yet gotten to. All right, leaving me with the microphone, folks. All right.
I'll jump in with one, Sue,
Oh.
because the question that I didn't hear that I thought was going to be asked was, how do you decide how you're going to divide responsibilities amongst the agency for oversight and figuring out who does what? And so let me offer that question and then give.
So Jordan, I just saw one question came in. How do you divide up responsibilities and determine oversight?
That's a great question, Sue.
Yeah, I thought
So I'm
so.
glad you asked. So, but my favorite response for this is to think about one of the things Simon Sinek used to say, still does say, and that is that great CEOs look up and out, and great COOs look down and in. And I'll give you my favorite illustration. I went to go see Book of Mormon on Broadway. Really interesting show. If you haven't seen it, I won't spoil it, but I'll tell you that I was so focused on how the thing was going to end, because it's strange, how they're going to get it back to something that resembles a logical conclusion, the answer to which is they don't. But I lost track of what was going on in the middle of it so many different times that I wasn't focused on what was happening in the moment. When I came back and shared that observation with my then COO, Sue Kelsey, she said, that's so funny, because when I saw Book of Mormon, I kept thinking about, how are they going to get the fucking confetti off the stage? I mean, is there a broom guy that comes in? Do the cast have to do it? What if it's still there? Do they pick it up? Do they ignore it? And I made the observation that she was so focused on what was happening in the moment, she lost track of what was happening next. So one of my big picture observations about how you figure out who does what is, the CEO ought to be the up and out person, and the COO ought to be the down and in person. So there is a fair degree of frequency that somebody will ask me about what's going on at the JCC or what we're doing about this. And my answer is, I don't know. I know who knows. And the best observation, I think, around this question is the COO ought to be the day-to-day person managing what the JCC is actually doing. And the CEO ought to be think about, where are we headed? And that division of labor, how we think about that. The size of the agency does matter in terms of who's doing what, but I really like that disposition of saying the CEO is focused on the future and the COO is focused on today.
I would say yes, and so I would say, I think it's important you have a little bit, maybe a toe or two in each of those other spaces. Otherwise, you're going to have some problems. I think it's important that, yes, I agree with Jordan. That is my role 100%. But I feel like succession of JCCs, especially since I think our field is being inundated by outside people, not that they're bad, I'm welcoming everybody from the outside. I think that you have to give people opportunities. I think all of you should have an opportunity to see what your CEO is doing and be part of it. Like, not saying you're going to sit down. I mean, we have a strategic report pages there helping with it, and you know, we're focusing it on together, not saying, again, I might do the outline and then ask for opinion. You know, there's a program going on in the building and Paige ultimately is running it. I mean, I might show up at it. I haven't done any of the planning, but I'm going to show up to support it a little bit. And, you know, although yes, we don't all need to be at the same, Sue's advice of not, you know, for both there might be a problem is true. But I think that the roles are definitely clear, but I do think there needs to be like that little gray line between both of those sides so that both of us understand what the other person's doing. Like, there just needs to be acknowledging. And then also, again, I think it's really important. If you're looking to possibly go on to a CEO position, there's no one better than your CEO to show you what they're doing and to learn some of it. Why start after you get that job? Why not know what you're doing before you're there? I mean, there's no reason, and there's time. I know we're all busy every single day. I understand it, but you know, I also know there's an opportunity there that shouldn't be overlooked. There's no reason, especially in our movement, where I do believe, and Joy can attest to this because that's what she did for so many years, is that we don't have the people. I mean, I like to think the JCCA is movement, you know, is going to be there forever. And if you don't have the right people who have a strong foundation moving on up, you know, I'm going to give a little plug for our friend Barack Herman, who was 30 years in the field, who's now going to be the head of JCCA. To me, it's a blessing. Like, you have somebody who's done everything that we have all done, and now he's going to run the movement. And how fantastic is that, opposed to someone from the outside? So I am a big proponent of COOs, sports directors, aquatics directors, team directors going on up in the field and then taking over these jobs so they understand what it means, inside. So
I love that. And you went even deeper on that. So I turn back to the people on this call and all the people we supervise, and what can we do to help advance them professionally, just as we're looking for our execs to help advance us professionally. There is a question in the chat that I'm going to read in just a second. In the meanwhile, also, I had an inquiry for people to identify themselves if they're going to be attending MIFGOSH in a couple of weeks. So if you could throw your name into the chat, or write into the chat, your name already shows up, just like I'm attending MIFGOSH, so that those of us who are going know who else is going to be there, and we could try to connect with one another. And I know there's lots of things in MIFGOSH where we will be connected with one another, but that was a question I want to respect. Samantha Klein asks, Laura, how did you transition from managing the day-to-day thought process to the CEO big picture thinking when you first became a CEO? Seems like it's a big brain shift that had to happen quickly.
Oh, I was horrible at it at the beginning. I couldn't let go. I was like, oh my gosh, form. I mean, like, what is an ECC? I was like all over the place. So it took me a while. And it could also be because I'm tired right now. I don't know. Like, it could be as I got older, I just couldn't do it all. But honestly, it took a long time. And it was, again, it had to happen organic. I had to be able to take a step back. It goes back to the whole trust situation where I knew that Paige was more capable than I was to be doing what I was used to be doing. And therefore it became a natural thing, but it was not an easy transition for me to let go. Listen, Paige was at the agency and she also moved up. So we sort of grew together, and I would think she also had trouble giving up what she was doing. So it was an easy thing for both of us to take that step together, but because it was in the same agency, I just want to say it's probably very different than someone becoming a CEO at a completely different agency, because at that point, you're not as familiar. And I actually think it would be easier becoming the CEO at a different agency just because you never had the other jobs. You don't know the day-to-day things that Jordan was saying is a COO's responsibility. But if you move up within your agency, it will take you a little while, but you got to let go, because it's not fair to the person who's now doing the job. Like, again, I don't believe in micromanaging, and definitely in the beginning, I probably did. And to Jordan's part, I probably was doing some things I shouldn't have been doing, like, and not doing the things that I needed to be doing. So it's like anything else, you have to slowly go into it. So I wish I could say it happened perfectly, but it did not. It was a slow process, but we're there now. I think that both Paige and I would 100% say we have moved on. Took 14 years, but we have.
I was going to say, just give me 14 years.
Yeah, we moved on. I just want everyone to know, I have to share with all of you that Paige and I have probably an absolutely incredible relationship. And she could talk badly at your COO meetings about me, but I like to believe that she doesn't. And, Sue always makes fun of us because when we go to these conferences, we room together. Like, you have to, I'm not saying everyone needs to be in the same situation, but I do want to make publicly known that I am blessed beyond to have a partner that I have in Paige. And I think that that's the reason that I love my job. I love the field and everything about it, because when you have that person to lean on, when you feel that comfortable, it's like in a marriage. I mean, we all laugh. Every time I get a new president of the board, I feel like I'm getting married all over again. And, I guess Paige is my second longest relationship that I've had in my life. So it's worked out. So I just wanted to share that out there.
Very sweet. So I have one more question that came in, and then this will be our last question, because I know we're going to want to wrap up. Oh, okay. Now everyone's got the questions. I'm going to read them both out loud, and you guys could decide how you want to address them. So when you look at the value of your partnership, how much of what you prioritize relates to hard skills versus softer pieces is number one question. The other is, can someone offer some suggestions about handling a situation where the CEO puts trust, responsibility, et cetera, in an agency person, consultant that you've clearly expressed that you do not have that same support and trust for?
Go ahead, Jordan. You take the first one.
I'll take the first one.
There.
The skill set one, and it's an easy answer for me. The soft skills are much more important. Hard skills are much easier to teach. So positivity, developing relationships, honesty, integrity, those are things you cannot teach. And therefore, when I'm looking to hire staff, frankly, at any level, but particularly as the number 2 of an organization, I'm looking for those kinds of things. Effective communicator, but can they program? Can they do a budget? Can they raise money? Can they manage effectively? I hope they have some of those things as well, but frankly, I can teach most of those things. So I'm looking for somebody that has the right attitude, not the right aptitude. And therefore, I actually really like up and coming staff that don't have a full skill set, that are eager and teachable. That is the prototype of like my preferred kind of staff person to recruit, because then I can help them learn and develop into the kind of professional I seek to have them be. But very much so, I lean heavily into the softer skills when I'm looking to recruit.
Laura?
I'm just looking at the second question, and it's a tough one because, I don't think the question, there's a lot of things that I think we'd have to know to answer that question properly. But I guess the first thing I would say is, I would hope that you're comfortable going over to the CEO and asking, similar, whatever words you want to use, as Jordan has phrased it, as Sue has phrased it, whatever words you want to use, and share that you're not comfortable with the person or the consultant or whatever, because there has to be a reason you're not, right? I mean, and then that goes back to the question where we said, can you talk to your CEO? Like Jordan said, the field, all his colleagues are looking for people to tell them when something is wrong. So I've got to believe if you don't believe in something, there's a real reason why, there's no self-interest involved. As long as it's pure and you're doing it, you're unhappy with them because of reasons that are not, selfish. I hate to say that, but for reasons that are just about you, then you have to be able to speak to that person. But there's so much, I would be very happy to get on a call and talk about it, as long as I knew more about what the situation was before I would say what I think you can do about it. Because I think it's too deep of a question.
I'd also add that your responsibility is to make sure that you've identified the downside risks and the consequences for what you're concerned about, right? Ultimately, if the CEO is the one that makes the decision, you can't necessarily change their mind. But what you can absolutely do is both educate them about what you think the risks and consequences are, and ask them their perspective on how to mitigate the challenges you perceive that will negatively impact the agency. You have the responsibility to make sure that they're clear about what you think those risks are, and you have the responsibility to know if those consequences happen, how are you supposed to work to manage whatever the consequence would be.
Thank you. I'm going to wrap it up. First, I do want to give a personal thank you to Laura and Jordan. You're both people who I've had the privilege of knowing for more years than any 3 of us want to acknowledge, in the field in so many different roles. And you've served as friends and mentors and advisors to me. And I appreciate that personally and professionally. And I extend that to thank you for sharing your wisdom with all of us on this call. And I think we all take away so much from what you've shared. So I'm going to turn the stage back to Paige or Joy. I'm not sure. And I thank you both.
Thank you, Sue, for moderating and taking on the questions and everything. So we really appreciate it. And Laura and Jordan, Laura, she knows I feel the same way, so I can't say much to that. But really, the 2 of you, your insights were, I think, incredible. And I can't imagine that there's anybody on this call, whether they have a fantastic relationship with their CEO and just shook their head and said yes, or we're looking for some insight and help in terms of how to better their relationship. Every one of us, I'm sure, took many things away from this, and really appreciate your honesty and candor with it, so that we can be better in our personal jobs and be better in our relationships with our CEOs. So thank you. And I also, I like those hearts, and I had to do that, Jordan. And I also just want to say that although I may be the chairperson, we have a committee who works on this. And so I just wanted to thank our entire committee, which is Josh and Julie, Michael, Rosalind, Sue, and Tara, if you can wave from where you are from your boxes, because we meet and come up with this, and certainly try and create things that everybody will find helpful and worthwhile. And hopefully everybody found this time worthwhile. I think actually Joy just put in what I was going to say, which is our next session is on April 3rd at 2 o'clock. We will send out the specific link so people can register, but if you want to put that on your calendar. And that one currently we have planned that we're going to be more in smaller group discussions based on topics of interest. So if you have a specific topic you want added to the list to make sure that it's in one of the discussion groups, please email me and let me know. We'll be happy to add that in. And hopefully we'll see many of you, it looks like, at MIFGOSH in just a few weeks. So thank you. And thank you, Joy and Sawyer, again, for helping us put this together.
Thank you, Paige, for leading the group and getting us started in all of these meetings. I did also put into the chat that there are regional conferences coming up. If your region doesn't have a conference coming up, but you have staff who are interested in attending, each of the regions are open to having people not specifically from their region. So if your region hasn't had a meeting recently, all the information is on the JCC Resource Center. You can find that there. Thank you all for participating. Thank you all from the bottom of my heart for all the hard work that all of you do. And it was great to have Jordan and Laura in conversation with you all. Best of luck, everybody, in moving forward. You all take care.